I'm Jim Sandman. I'm president of the Legal Services Corporation, which is the country's single largest funder of civil legal aid programs for low-income Americans. We fund 134 independent legal aid organizations with almost 800 offices serving every county in every state and the territories as well. No matter where you are in the United States, there's an LSC-funded legal aid program providing assistance to low-income people. My job gives me a perspective on the state of access to justice, access to civil justice for low-income Americans today. What I'd like to do briefly in opening is to tell you what the state of access to justice is today for low-income people. Second, to tell you what current efforts are to expand access to justice. And lastly, to offer you a perspective on how we might do things differently. For more than a generation, studies have shown that only 20% of the civil legal needs of low-income people are met. There are a lot of reasons for that, many of which Rebecca Sandifer explained yesterday. One of the most important reasons is that civil legal aid is woefully underfunded and inadequate to meet the need. A recent study by the Boston Bar Association showed that of people who affirmatively sought legal aid in Massachusetts and who were financially eligible, 64% were turned away. In courthouses across the United States today, courtrooms are overwhelmed with unrepresented litigants. Typically in the United States today, more than 90% of tenants facing eviction have no lawyer, while more than 90% of landlords do. Typically, in the United States today, more than 90% of parents seeking child support have no lawyer. We have a debt collection system in the United States that's been built on the assumption that the overwhelming majority of defendants are going to default. The plaintiff will win simply by filing suit, even if the plaintiff doesn't own the debt, even if the debtor has paid off or reduced the amount of the debt. The situation is so dire that at some LSC-funded legal aid programs today, if a victim of domestic violence shows up seeking a protection order against an abuser, she will be asked, are there children in the household? And if the answer is no, she's turned away. Imagine that. It takes courage for a victim of domestic violence to seek protection against an abuser. That very act could put her at further risk. What if he finds out? So she screws up her courage and goes to a legal aid office to seek help, and she's turned away because there are no children in the household. And her option at that point is to go into court alone, potentially to face her abuser in person. He may have a lawyer if he controls the family finances and can afford to pay for one. I think this situation is a national disgrace. I think all of these things are indicators of a severely dysfunctional system. The dysfunction affects poor people disproportionately. And because they are poor and powerless and often invisible, the magnitude of the dysfunction has gone undetected for a long time. But I think poor people are just the canaries in the coal mine. And as their experiences begin to expand to people of modest and moderate means, I think that public perception of the very integrity of our legal system and the rule of law will be threatened. So what is being done today to try to address this situation? Current solutions have two prongs. The first is to try to make more lawyers available to more people by increasing financial support for legal aid, by expanding pro bono resources, and by promoting unbundled legal services. The second approach is to use a combination of standardized forms, technology, court-based resource centers, and navigators to try to help people help themselves, to help the self-represented navigate the system. Both of these are good and noble and necessary efforts. Neither of them is remotely adequate. I don't see the day coming anytime soon when financial resources are going to be adequate to provide a lawyer to everyone who needs one to address a civil legal need. There are many things going on in technology and self-help resources. I see people here in this room who have done extraordinary things. I see Judge Fern Fisher, whose efforts in New York are a national model for what we should be doing. I see Allison Paul from Montana, who's used technology to address her client population in a state that has only 6 people per square mile, and where traditional legal aid service delivery models won't work. I see my colleague Glenn Rawdon, who has spearheaded LSC's Technology Initiative Grants program for 15 years and is a national hero in my estimation. But you know, what all of these self-help assistance models are trying to do is to deal with a legal system that was created largely by lawyers for lawyers, a system that is based at almost every turn on the assumption that you have a lawyer, and that doesn't work as intended when you don't. So there are real limitations on what we can accomplish with that kind of approach. What do I recommend? I think we need solutions and innovations that are commensurate with the magnitude and the urgency of the problem that we face. We need solutions that can be scaled, that have big impact. A lot of the technology solutions that we have across the United States today are very uneven, both in quality and availability. Early this morning, Ron Stout, who's been both a prophet and a pioneer in the use of technology to deliver legal services, told me that he thought that the use of document assembly systems, these systems that function like TurboTax, that guide you through a plain language interview and produce forms that courts will accept, he estimates that the current penetration of those systems is about 5% nationally. We need to rethink the service delivery model from the ground up, and to do it from a consumer perspective, not from a lawyer's perspective. And I'd like to point to one example of the kind of rethinking that I think provides a model for us. It's an outgrowth of the technology summit that the Legal Services Corporation convened a couple of years ago. We produced a report that's available on our website, lsc.gov. Although the report is focused on technology, it really goes much beyond that. It advocates a fundamental rethinking of the service delivery model, and it proposes that we set up in each state an integrated, statewide, universal portal for anyone seeking legal assistance that includes all of the legal services providers in the state. And it starts with a triage process, with the goal of providing what the report called some form of effective assistance. Some form of effective assistance for 100% of people seeking assistance in dealing with an essential legal need. The triage process would help determine what the most appropriate and feasible level of service is under all of the circumstances, taking account of the complexity of the matter, the sophistication of the client, whether the opponent is represented, what's at stake. And then it would direct the client to the most appropriate level of service. The model would also provide document assembly assistance, mobile resources, checklists and expert systems, and would be on a statewide integrated basis. I commend the report to you just as a way of thinking about how we approach these problems. That model that the report recommends still assumes that we have the system we have today, that system designed by lawyers for lawyers. But I think it offers a significant opportunity to improve what we do for the people who depend on our legal system. Thank you.